Walking through Bexley Square today, it's quite a reflective spot. Sat underneath the branches of these great trees, set aside from the hubbub of Chapel Street. It's a place you might sit and read a book in the summer sunshine, or watch from the cafe window on a bright day like today. It's hard to imagine that this spot 91 years ago, on Thursday the 1st of October, a riot took place which has gone down in the annals of local history.
The Battle of Bexley Square, October the 1st, 1931, was a demonstration against the means test that had been imposed on the unemployed by the then Labour-led national government. It was organised, not very far from here, in a building called Hindman Hall. It was organised by an organisation called the National Unemployed Workers Movement that had been set up in the 20s, really by the Communist Party of Great Britain that was formed in 1920. The secretary of the National Unemployed Workers Movement, the chair in Salford, was one Eddie Frow. He was 24 years of age in 1931. They organised the demonstration really about a week, 2 weeks before the 1st of October. Yeah. At the time, 1 in 3 adult males were unemployed in Salford. The economic context of this really is that, 3 years ago to the week had been the Wall Street crash, and Britain actually did not really benefit from a post-First World War boom at all like the US. A lot of the textile markets had been lost during the First World War, were never regained, and actually Britain during the 1920s was a pretty depressed place anyway. When the textiles are hit, Manchester was hit. And so Eddie leads this demonstration, Eddie Frow, and he has a series of demands, 4 demands: abolition of the means test, provision of milk, provision of coal to keep people alive and to keep
the
children.
basics, basically.
Yeah. And people found the imposition of means tests really dehumanising, a gross intrusion into their lives. People were forced to pawn their furniture and sit on orange boxes. Frank Lawn, who was a Labour MP for Salford, at the time of the Second World War, in the 1930s, he wrote that you would see people, if you saw men, they had a look about them, they were never going to work again. Yeah. The Salford Workers Arts Club was where the National Unemployed Workers Movement of Salford met on a weekly basis. People paid a penny subscription. It had boxing, it showed films, not just Jimmy Cagney, but European cinema, and it had meetings on Marxism, etc., and the Communist Party would meet there. And the crowd gathered in what was called a croft at the time, from waste ground next to Hindman Hall, and it is bigger. It is bigger than Jimmy Miller dreamt it would be. And they start to come down Liverpool Street, and the police are surprised, if not somewhat frightened, by the size of it. And they'd lay a cordon across Liverpool Street. But as Wilf Gray, one of the marchers, says, we went through them like a knife through soft putty. I remember my head going down as if in a rugby scrum. With the pressure from our comrades behind, we pushed them to one side quite easily. So more and more people join this march, actually en route. And when it comes to Bexley Square, there are too many people for it to fit in the square, and they spill over. Now, the square is actually smaller now
than it was
then now. And the police estimated that there were 1,000 people. Now, I don't know, an expert on ergonomics, but I think we could comfortably probably get 1,000 people in this square. The marchers estimated that there was 10,000, and it was overspilling. So the police are kind of rattled by what's happened to them on Liverpool Street, where they've just come through. And there are mounted police waiting at the side. And when the marchers get into the square, the mounted police advance, and they're just lashing out with truncheons. And people can't move. They can't go back because of the pressure of the numbers. And so they begin to fight back. One young lad, known as Jimmy Miller, 16 at the time, went on to become better known Ewan Maccoll. At the end of his life, he writes about this experience. And he says, "The first engagement was fierce, but the police have tasted blood and are now lashing out at anyone in their path. But we are fighting back, and the horses no longer terrify us. Here a mounted cop is pulled from his horse, and there is a constable deprived of his baton." Now Eddie, perhaps, I don't know, he's been very ambitious, perhaps, decides that he will go to speak to the Salford City Councillors and just politely speak in the council chamber and list his demands. So he advances to the front to meet the Chief Constable. Meanwhile, there's all this fighting going on. And he said, "I'd like to put my demands." At which point, the Chief Constable gives a signal and he's apprehended by 4 officers, taken in to the town hall, and he's struck in the face with a baton. "I was taken into the town hall where 4 policemen let fly with their batons. My nose streamed blood and I had to be taken to Salford Royal Hospital. When I returned to the town hall, Major Godfrey, the Chief Constable, came in to see what had happened to me, and I was able to tell him exactly what I thought of the brutality of his police and accuse him of having instigated." Now Eddie was in fact charged with assault. He decided to defend himself in court, and he told the court that he'd assaulted no one, etc. However, he was given 3 months hard labour at strange ways, and he didn't even get a bed at that time. He slept on boards, and his job or his hard labour was breaking rocks into stones. Well, I knew Eddie, but I always noticed that his nose was scarred and out of shape. And
that was really, from the beating, was it?
That was from that beating, and apparently he suffered from gratuitous nosebleeds for the rest of his life from 1931. Well, it's really strange because when I went to Salford University, and I graduated at the kind of worst possible time to get a job in 1981.
Yeah.
And I'm not from Manchester, as you can tell, but I loved Manchester and I wanted to stay in this part of the world. Anyway, I ended up going on the Right to Work March for the People's March for Jobs in 1981. And I thought, well, finally, actually, somebody's organising the unemployed in the 1980s under the Thatcher government. And why not? Why not follow in their footsteps, as it were? And we marched from Liverpool to Blackpool to the Tory Party conference.
So
and got a similar response from the police.
There's a similarity though, isn't there, with some of the stuff happening today? So we've got universal credit, we've got sanctions and conditionality, we've got a cost of living crisis, rising energy prices, stagnating wages, and obviously inflation just running riot, all having a huge impact on people's lives and pushing people more and more into poverty and inequality.
And people were desperate in 31.
Yeah.
People are becoming desperate now.
Absolutely. So, Michael, in your opinion, what do you think the immediate legacy of Bexley Square was on, the politics of the time?
The politics locally, I think it sets a ball rolling. So, Ewan Maccoll, Jimmy Miller, he's just joined the Young Communist League, and it's an organisation with a grand total of 12 people. in Salford, and he's in a theatre group, and in fact I think he and his little theatre group called the Red Megaphones perform to the assembled at Hyman Hall before the march begins. What happens is that the National Unemployed Workers Movement, that organised the demonstration, becomes a bigger organisation locally. The Communist Party and the Young Communist League, which is their youth wing, becomes a bigger organisation locally, and they become more confident. The following year, there was another event organised, some of the same individuals, and people may have heard of this, which was the mass trespass on Kinder Scout. And this is organised just down the road, and it was in the Salford area, is Cheetham, which is a Jewish quarter of Manchester, of Salford at that particular time. Alex Armstrong goes on Kinder Scout to mass trespass. 4 years later, he goes to Spain to fight Franco's army for it, and he's sadly killed. So still a teenager, and he's in the red megaphones with Jimmy Miller. It draws in individuals. This is the organisation that's doing something, the National Unemployed Workers Movement. And Walter Greenwood, the great literary legacy, is there is a book written, Love on the Dole, which kind of ends. And Eddie Frow, who knew Walter, is a character. He's given a name. This is a passage, and this is the Eddie he knew. Speaking to the crowd, if you like, at Hyman Hall. A finely featured young man with long hair took his place on the rostrum, instantly winning the acclamation of the crowd by heaping invective upon all with whom he dissociated himself in the social scale. The column halted, the drum and bell was silenced. The organiser stepped forward, desirous of an explanation, receiving scant courtesy of the inspector, who, pointing his stick down the road and staring elsewhere than at the man to whom his remarks were addressed, said, "Keep straight on." So, it's immortalised in Love on the Dole, one of the great working class novels of the 20th century. A ball is rolling politically, and the anonymous, the masses, are getting organised. Stage by stage, they head, and 2 years from here, they're fighting the Black Shirts in Cheetham and elsewhere in Manchester, because they will not allow fascism in this country, and they learnt the lessons from Germany. So I think there's a heady mix, and history repeats.
I think the Battle of Bexley Square tells us many things about today. When you have people scared for their future and given no hope, worried about paying for either heating or eating. People say enough is enough. There's only so much we can take. The Battle of Bexley Square happened in a time before the trade unions had won many of the rights we now take for granted in society. When the majority of people in work would lead a life on low pay and insecurity. It's a world that has seemed very distant for a long time in this country, but it feels today that we're heading back to it. Government attacks on the right to strike, on the right to protest as living conditions rapidly deteriorate after 20 years of wage stagnation. What's going to happen from here? It's hard to say, but history shows us that you can only put so much pressure on people before things start to break.
I found my love by the gasworks crofts, dreamed a dream by the old canal, kissed my girl by the factory wall. Dirty old town, dirty old town.
Heard a siren from the dawn. Saw a train set the night on fire. Smell the spring on the smoky wind.
Dirty old town, dirty old town.